C67S. If I can show you, this is really more of an egg hook, but it's big and heavy, and it'd probably be easier for you to follow me by doing that. Two other good ones. White River, the Bass Pro Shop, makes an excellent hook for this. It's WR069, and it's a nice hook. In fact, I like a lot of the White River hooks from Bass Pro. Another one you could use is a clink hammer. Okay, this is a Daiichi 1167, and any one of the three will work quite fine. The best sizes are 12 through 16. I'll make a 12, so it's a little bit bigger. The final fly, if I can hold it up here and get you to see it. I don't know if I'm anywhere near. I always have trouble with camera angles. Yeah, here it is here. The fly, let me put it in my other hand, is nothing except a curved shank hook, some Jameson yarn, and a little hot spot, orange, hot orange, bright red, pink, or even chartreuse. They all seem to work equally well. It's a very simple pattern to tie. Let me run it through. If you can follow and see what I'm doing, let me know if you can't. I start basically, I can get this thing over where you can see what I'm doing. I start basically just with a bare shank, and I wrap about 10 or 12 wraps of 015 wire, just to help it get down a little bit. I follow that up with a hot orange thread. It's very important to leave about at least 2 eye lengths and go out to the back to lock in the thread. And another little trick, I'm sure if you've seen me tie before, you hear me say this all the time. Back in the old days in the Catskills, when they wanted to tie stonefly nymphs, the old timers would take 2 pieces of lead and tie them parallel to the shank so that the lead would be flat, and that way the fly would ride correctly. Sometimes if the lead is round, the fly will be off center. A much simpler way to do this is to get a pair of flat-nosed, I'll put them up here so you can see, flat-nosed pliers, and simply go in and flatten the lead with them. It's a much simpler way. We'll see it again when I do the CK, okay? Then you go back up. The yarn you need is pretty simple. It's a Jameson. If you can see that, the Jameson Spendthrift yarn. The color that you want, the very best color for this is oyster. You can find it in Joann Fabrics, just about any store that sells yarn will do it. So let me take a piece of this yarn. What I do it is I lay it on top just so I can make kind of a tapered body.
So is Joe, is that a wool yarn?
It's a, let me see what it is here. It says oyster. The color is 290. Jameson's Shetland Spindrift, S-P-I-N Drift. Let's just see if I can get any other.
And that's fine.
Doesn't seem to have anything, but I know you can get it at places like Joann Fabrics. That's where I get this. And go right into the bend and then go back up just so you get a taper. But be sure to leave that bare spot. Now, this is the only thing you really have to do to make this right. When you get ready, let me see here. I've got to find my, okay. Yep. Okay. When you get ready to tie this, okay, and you get the wool down, you don't, take it from, I think it's a 2-ply wool. Just take the whole thing, but you've got to twist it clockwise. And you have to twist it very, very tight. And if you don't do that, the fly won't come out right. It's got to be very, very tight. You can see I'm just doing it by hand. If you let it go loose, it'll start to pop like that. And that's a sign you're getting there. But you almost can't make it too tight. And once you have it, all you need to do is just wrap it up the shank. And when it's tight enough, the body will appear segmented. And that's the reason you have to make it very tight and do it clockwise. If you do it counterclockwise, the underbody will show, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't seem to look as good. So when you get there, you want to just tie it off. A good bunch of wraps and a little old professional fly tires trick. Always cut it at the angle so that the eye looks down, and that way you'll have a nice tapered head. And then the trick to it is to build a hot spot, just like that. And I think what happens is that catches the fish's attention. And I'm sure they grab it most likely for a scud or a freshwater shrimp. Put a whip finish in. And you're done. And when I get done, what I like to do, some guys don't bother, but I like to take a little Velcro and lightly pick it out. Because freshwater shrimp have a lot of legs and kind of a translucency to them. And that's what I do to get that effect. A very simple fly, really, really easy to make. You want to fish it down deep. I use an AB Dinsmore green non-toxic shot. And that seems, put it about a foot, maybe ahead of the fly. Fish it right dead drift on the bottom. And I know it doesn't seem possible, but it catches a lot of fish. And just to show you the difference, if you take a long shank, maybe a 6 or an 8, put in a little bit of Antron for a tail, wrap it the very same way and use a light pink thread. They take this for a crane fly. It's tied the same way. You don't have to wrap it quite as tightly, but you do want to fuzz it out a little bit. And again, the time to fish crane flies would be like now, with the rain finished and the water coming up from brown to green to clear. As the water comes up, this is an extremely good fly. I make a different pattern, but I've had good luck using this spendthrift yarn. The one I make is this one. I put a little bit of partridge for a tail, kind of a muddy olive gray green, and a little partridge for horns. And I'm biased, I guess. I find this one works a little better, but that other one works really well. It's sinfully simple to make. And I don't know why more guys don't know about crane flies. They're absolutely deadly when the stream is coming up to clear. So,
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
So you probably said this, but I missed it. Is the hook size that you recommend for this one?
Oh, for the bigger one?
No, just for the one that you tried.
I find 12 and 14 to be the best sizes. Either a clink hammer or that one mustad hook.
Yeah.
This is a C67S. And this is a size 6. It's bigger, but I used it just to illustrate the tying. Most of the time, a clink hammer number 12 hook will work just fine.
Okay,
or
good.
a 14.
Or a caddis hook, any kind of a curved hook like that.
Yeah, a grub hook. Basically, a wide gap is probably a little better because the body has, with the wool yarn, it's a little bit big. But it's a wonderful, wonderful fly, and for the simplicity of it, it shouldn't work as well as it does, but it does. So it's hard to argue with success. Okay, let me show you a nymph that I would not be without for fishing around here from winter all the way through summer and fall. It's called the CK nymph. It's not very hard to make. And by the way, if you tie a lot, it's a good idea to make kits. And that way, everything is in a bag. When you're ready to tie, everything's right in front of you. And when you're finished, you put everything back and you're good to go the next time. So what we'll do here, the CK imitates, I think, a hellgrammite. And the hook I like for it is, let me read it off to you here. It's a Daiichi 1710 number 6. Very, very good fly. 6 and 8 are the best sizes. Again, because hellgrammites, Dobson flies, have pretty big bodies. And so the fisher, used to a mouthful. The guy that showed me this fly, I haven't seen him in, oh God, 40 years. A fellow by the name of Joe Flash. He taught up at Syracuse in the medical school. And I was fishing Salmon Creek one day, and he was just hammering these lovely rainbows, one after the other. And we got talking, and he said, oh, yeah, he said, this is one in the early season, especially, you don't want to be without. But I found the same thing is true in the fall. Landlocked salmon just jump all over this thing. And it's a pretty easy fly to tie. I put a 3/16 bead head on it, like that, okay? And behind that, on a bare hook, I don't use a lot, but you really want to get this on the bottom. It's no good unless it's right fished on the bottom. I make 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll call it 11. Put the lead right on the bare shank.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
The bead, is that a tungsten bead or brass?
It's a tungsten gold. Yes. You do want a good heavy nymph. This fly just is a bottom dweller, so you got to be there with it. To now, what I do is after I put the lead on the bare shank, I push it right into the bead as far as it'll go. Okay, and then I start my thread wraps just to lock it on down. And if you want to get fancy, you really don't have to. But if you want to get, you can take some black floss and put that on. But I find the thread is enough because the body all gets covered up anyway. And once you're there, you want to take those flat nose pliers again. I couldn't be without these things. I'm telling you, if you have to buy one thing, that's one thing to have. Just go in and flatten the lead so the fly will ride through. And then go down to the end. Okay, and one thing that you want for this, I like real wood duck for a tail. You can use the mallard plank dyed wood duck, but I don't know, I guess I'm a traditionalist or something. I just like what I do is I go in and find the very center. Clip that part out. And then I want a tail. That's about, half, 3/4 of a shank length. Lay that in, go forward like that. Go under just to lock it. Go back up forward again. Next thing you need is black wool. You can use peacock and twist it onto the thread to make a rope, and that works equally well. But the wool is so simple that it makes more sense simply to use that. Bring that right back to the tail. Come up a little bit.
Joe, the tail relative to the shank length, how much are you, about half the length of the shank, or?
Maybe half to 3/4, somewhere. Okay. You can see it's in there.
Yeah.
And then you want a grizzly hackle. You take it right off the back of the feather. Or the back of the neck, rather. And once again, I couldn't be without these pliers. With all the soft tackles and everything I tie, I always flatten the stem.
Oh,
And what that does is, as you'll see, it makes the fly ride or come away from the spine of the feather at 90 degrees. Okay. And just bring your thread up front. Take your wool. You want the good side of the feather facing you. This really is an amazing nymph. You can go down to curved hooks, maybe on a size 10 or 12 for summer. I like to wrap it tight against the bead and tie it off like that. Snip it. Then what you want to do is you take your grizzly feather and palmer it all the way up the body. And you see by flattening that stem, even with dry flies, you'll find that the feather behaves far, far better than if you don't flatten it.
So that's like a really tight palmering, right, Joe?
yeah,
Fairly tight.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be, because what's going to happen next is the key to making this fly work. And I'll share a trick with you. A lot of you probably fish with green weenies. And if you tie a green weenie and you palmer the fluorescent green hackle, just like I'm doing here, up through the body, and then do the same thing I'm going to do with this body. You'll be amazed at how much better it works. Guys who told me the modified green weenie, as they call it, works 5 times better than the regular one. And I think it's just because of the way the light goes through the feather. Okay. And by the way, when I tie that whip finish, I always like to hear that little boom, because it means that the thread has gone up under the wraps and it won't eventually rot out. Now here's the secret to this fly. When you're all done, take it out and you clip it down like a gun brush.
Oh,
Do the same thing with your green weenies after you put a fluorescent hackle on, and you'll be amazed at how much better they work. And my theory is when you hold it up to the light, you can see the light just kind of goes right through it. And for some reason, the fish find that extremely attractive. So when you're all done, that's your green weenie. If there's any nymph, I mean, it's in the category with the hare's ear and the fox squirrel nymph. This will take fish anywhere. Delaware River, the beaver kill, the loyal sock, all, you know, trout that are snooty, they just suck these up as long as they're on the bottom. So I would absolutely urge you to make some CKs. It's probably in the top 3 nymphs that I fish whenever I decide I want to catch a fish and I don't want to be long about doing it. So that's
Joe, Joe, a couple questions we have a little chat box here, and so people asked a few questions. So for this size hook, what size lead wire do you use?
yeah.
For this one, I use 20.
Okay.
or 25, either one. And you don't have to really go crazy with it. You might want to go 10 or 12 wraps and push it on the bare shank, push it into the bead, and then lock it down with your thread and flatten it. It does make a difference if you flatten it in terms of the way the nymph rides.
Another question is, I assumed you were using black thread. Was that?
Yes,
black? Yeah, cool.
a dark olive will also work, especially with the peacock.
Mm. So, and you suggest that if we want to use our chartreuse, we palmer the hackle and then clip it top and bottom?
Yes, if you tie a green weenie, you can find it. The quality of the hackle really doesn't matter. You can find some old junk salt water, fluorescent green, or chartreuse rather. And once you tie it in before you make your loop and wrap the chenille weenie body, and then after you're done with that, just palmer that just the way I did the CK, and then clip it down just like a gun brush, and it makes an amazing difference. And my only thought is it must be the way the light goes through it when it goes past the fish. But every guy I've told that to that's gone out and tried it will come back to me and say, you know, you can catch 5 for every one you catch with a regular green weenie, fish in the same hole, the same spot, the same depth. It's just for some reason they find it very attractive.
Cool. Worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it on the CK?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
go. Yeah.
All right, let me show you the Hendrickson Emerger. Jack Garthside showed me 40 years ago. And even now, as I wrote in that little blurb, with the CDC and the snowshoe dun emergers and all the rest of it, this pattern is still an absolute top shelf. Whenever there are Hendricksons or March Browns, you can change the color a little bit and do the very same thing. And you definitely will catch fish. In fact, Jack and I were on the Beaver Kill, and these guys were throwing everything imaginable at them. And we were both just picking fish up, one after the other. And a couple of guys come over and finally said, Jesus, what the hell are you guys using? And Jack said, here, take a couple of these. And right away, they were into fish too. So, I mean, I've seen this pattern work with my own eyes. I can tell you it's top shelf and not hard to tie. The first thing you have to know about it, though, is it uses aftershaft feathers. Some guys call them philo plumes. I guess technically the aftershaft is the correct term, but you'd have to talk to an ornithologist. I don't know whether that's true or not. But what an aftershaft feather is if you go into a pheasant neck, okay? Let me find one that's a better example here. Yeah, here we go. If you go into a pheasant neck and you find those nice fat feathers like this, if you turn them over and you look, you see there's a little thin, it looks almost like mini ostrich herl. You see that?
Put it up here. And maybe a little further away from the camera.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. There's 2 things you got to know about this. You take it off and you always tie it in by the butt. And you pull the tip off before you try to wrap it. Because if you don't do that, you'll lose your religion. It'll keep breaking on you. All right? So I've got some here somewhere already, already prepped. So I'll take a couple out just to show you what they look like. They vary in size, but you only use one part of the feather. So let me get 1 or 2 out to show you first. Okay, that's an aftershaft feather. Oops. I
Can you
don't
hold
know.
it up a little bit?
Camera drives me crazy here.
Uh,
Okay, that's an aftershaft feather all by itself. Okay. When you're ready to tie with it, you go down to the bottom, you strip the junk off, and you go to the very tip top, and you break that off. And what you're left with is a feather that looks like that. Okay. That doesn't look like much. What most people, when they see that, will just kind of sort of give you the fisheye and say, what are you going to do with that? Okay. But again, I'll tie it on a 12. You can get away with a 14 as well. But I find it'll be a little easier to see if I tie it with a 12. Just losing my... All right, let me get it. Okay, the hook I'll use for this is it's a white river. Again, it's a Bass Pro. They make pretty nice hooks and the price is right. I use a lot of them and I've never had a problem with them. This one is called the WR, I guess for White River, 001. And it's simply a number 12 dry fly hook. So I'll grab one of these. You can actually use a 1X or a 2X long for this pattern. And you'll find that works quite well as well. Especially if you're tying March Browns. They tend to be a little bit bigger. But I'll just put it on a 12. I'm going to start with a layer of olive thread. You can use brown, you can use black. But I like the dark olive. It seems to work quite well. Okay, now I got to go. Where did I put it? Here we go. I got to go look for my wood duck again. Again, for this fly, I really do like real wood duck. But you can get away with the mallard dyed if you want. But I just don't think it looks as nice. And again, you want the feathers, the tail, to be about not quite a shank's length. Oh, something went wrong there. To try that one again. Here we go. All right, here we are. I just clip out the center stem. I think it makes for a neater tail. Okay. Yeah, that's a little long, but it's not going to hurt anything. I'm sure they make it for a shuck, so. then for your body, want to wax it up just a little bit. Now for the body, I like hair-tron dubbing, or I have, actually I have my own, I gotta just keep separating my kits here. Yeah, here we are, okay. I call this my custom blend hare's ear. You don't have to go crazy. Antron will work. It's just, I like to mix my own in a coffee grinder. And I just like the way it turns out. Most of you probably know this already, but if you don't, when you put dubbing on for a fly like this, always leave about 1/8 of an inch of bare thread. And that way, when you first start to wind, see, the dubbing will just grow right out of the body. And you won't have any lumps or bumps or another one of the old professional tyers tricks. You don't have to go crazy with this, but I'll just put enough on to. Okay, now here comes the fun part. What you want to do now is you want to take that after shaft feather, tie it in by the butt, and tie it back a ways. And those of you who have seen me tie before know I'm a big fan of these guys. They're cuticle clippers. They're like half a nail clipper. Lacrosse makes the best ones. And they go about $5 a pop, but you can work very closely with them. You can cut wires, you can cut tinsel, you can cut just about anything. Hackle, you can work very, very close, and you can save your good scissors for more delicate work. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this thread just shy of the eye, take hackle pliers, and if you're careful, you just palmer this up the shank. See that? Four or five wraps will do it. I think I'll get a couple of oohs and ahs at the end of this. Pattern doesn't look like any great shakes. Again, you always want to cut material at the same angle as the eye looks down. That'll give you a nice professional looking head. Take a few more wraps. Bring the whip finisher into action. And again, I like that little boink. Okay, here's the thing that makes this pattern shine. One on the bottom, and just cut away. Okay, now watch this carefully. I hope you can see it well. Okay, take your thumb and forefinger, wet them a little, Just grab the top and lift. See the little wing emerging? If you do that, it'll stay that way when you fish. See how it looks like it's just coming out of the case? One of the best emerger patterns you can ever fish with. So maybe you'll go after some aftershaft feathers. Most guys throw them away because they don't know what to do with them. But once you see them, oops, I see if I can get this so you can really see it. Just not good with the skin. There we go. That little thing that's hanging off the end looks like a little bit of marabou or ostrich herl. Don't throw it away. It makes a great emerger case or an emerger wing. Can you see the shape of that now?
Yeah. So, Joe, a couple questions for you, buddy.
Yeah.
So you tied this in a size 12. Do you, when I think of Hendricksons, I think like 14s?
Yeah, 12s and 14s. The thing that is interesting about this, I actually tie it sometimes on a 12 2X long, and yet the fish will grab it, even though it's a little bigger. I think what it is it looks like it's struggling, trying to get out of that wing case. And, you know, predators always go for the easy pick.
Yeah,
but I think you'll...
If it's coming out of the nymphal shuck, maybe it's larger than the actual insect because you got the shuck and bug together. And
yeah, well, that could be, but for some reason, even in Hendrickson hatch with some smart fish. I mean, years ago in the 70s down in the Beaverkill, you didn't find any smarter than those wild trout, but they take it like goldfish coming up to eat their food.
Hey, Joe, John Lively.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, John, hi.
Hi. So when you fish this fly, is it floating, sinking, riding on the surface?
Both. But what you really want to do with it, I find one of the best ways to fish with it is if I can get upstream of the fish and then throw it down a few feet above his window, put a Mendeso in so that it kind of drifts into the edge of the front edge of his window. And a lot of times that's all it takes. And if it's in the film a little bit, that doesn't hurt anything at all.
Mm.
In fact, you can dress it with floatant and fish it like a dry, and they'll take it that way too.
Right. So you kind of throw it quartering downstream in front of the, and drift it down into the window. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And the idea is you don't want him to see line or leader. The first thing you want him to see is this emerger.
Sure. Yep.
hey, Joe, do you ever use this emerger style for other hatches beyond the Hendrickson?
Oh, the March Browns. All you need is a slightly bigger hook and a slightly bigger aftershaft feather. Everything else is essentially the same. The color is a little lighter. The Marsh Browns are more like a tan in a body. But other than that, you use essentially the same technique.
It's really clever. And it's important to wet the aftershaft?
It'll eventually assume that shape anyway, but what I do is I wet them before I fish with them. So the wing shape is already coming out of the thorax.
Very cool.
Joe, Matt Counts here.
Huh?
Matt Counts here. Quick question.
Sure.
So theoretically, that aftershaft looks like almost like a light dun. Is that a light dun color of that aftershaft feather?
That's a good way to describe it.
So,
yes, indeed. Yep.
So theoretically, I think if one could vary the shade of the body dubbing to mimic any sort of mayfly species with a dark dun wing. Okay.
They'll work. Absolutely. anything that comes through the surface to hatch, that kind of a emerging wing will work.
Okay, thanks.
But mayflies are almost always, the wings are darker when they're first hatching, and it's the sun hitting that dark color that makes it, get things pumping for them. So almost all of them are a kind of a charcoal or a light dun color when they come out.
So Joe, it's John Lively again. So let me ask you a follow-up question there. This uses aftershaft for the wing. Another popular material for emerger wings is snowshoe hair
Oh, absolutely.
fur.
You
So
could
is
use
there a reason one would be preferred over the other, or?
Well, I think what it is, John, is I think it's the shape of the emerging wing. The snowshoe is more of a just like a pointing backward, and it has a lot more floatability than this does. But in a way, I think that's not necessarily an advantage. These seem to work best when they're in the film or just under it.
Okay. So if you want something that floats high,
Yeah, I
a
go with
snowshoe would be
snowshoe or
better.
with CDC.
Yeah, okay.
And with the CDC, I do something when in Britain, they call them shuttlecocks. If you have a CDC in the same shade, instead of tying it back, tie it over the wing like a quiggly cripple and use the thread to raise it slightly above the eye like that. And
Right.
it'll hang right in the film.
Right.
I'd like
Cool.
to offer a slight modification for your consideration. On your shuck, if you would take a piece of Maxima and the smallest beads you can find, bring about 5 or 6 beads on that and tie it in when you lay down your basic thread, and bring it back on the shaft about, I'd say, so it's at a 45-degree angle. You can take that and you can crush your beads to get it to float half in the surface.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had this thing work down on the Delaware. I was killing fish and people next to me were cursing me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
That's happened to me a few times.
but that works like a champ.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. It's
What kind
the
of
thing-
beads are you talking about?
Just go to a craft store and find
Little
the
craft
smallest
store
glass
beads, yeah.
beads you can find.
Huh.
Yeah, they use them a lot. There's an old pattern from years ago called the Killer Caddis. I don't know. You could probably look it up on the web. And they used to use those little tiny craft beads pretty much for a body to give it translucency. You could probably still find that if you look for it. I think it was called the Killer Caddis. And they used to sell kits with the hooks. And if I remember, they were green and the thread was claret. And it was pretty much the same idea. They kind of hang in the film. The fish are always after something that isn't going to get away easily. So.
Yeah, I tie that on a crippled cat or on a crippled emerger.
Yep.
And whatever mayfly is hatching, tie it in that pattern.
Yeah.
Also, you melt the one end of the Maxima before you start stringing.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sure. Okay, you ready for another one?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Okay. I'll show you what the finished product looks like or should look like first. Okay. This is called a copper caddis. it was a pattern Jack developed, way back in probably the early 70s, mid 70s. It's a strange configuration. I know a better way to do it now than I did then, but I'll show you what the feathers are. The one thing every tyer should have. Jack was, God rest him, he was absolutely in love with pheasant skins, the whole pheasant skin. He used to say, you know, there were enough feathers on here to tie for 20 years. And the feathers we'll be using are these coppery types. I can't see this thing very well. The coppery feathers right in here, okay? And what we did, Jack was the one, I didn't, I just had the benefit of his genius. But what Jack did is he took those feathers. I'll show you what they look like. I have to find one of the right size. Okay. A couple of them so you get a chance to look at them, see what they look like. Okay. These little copper, those little copper colored feathers. I was the one that actually named the pattern, I guess. I said they just see they have the color of copper in them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what we do with these, I think I must have needed a life or something, the time I spent doing this stuff. We used to take the feathers off the skin and take a piece of shipping tape. Post office had just come out with it. It was like in the mid 70s. And you'd attach these strip the bottom fluff off and attach them by the butts down along the shipping tape. And then we would paint them with light spar varnish. I think the product was called Man of War. And if you know spar varnish, if any of you do sailing, it's got a lot of the light spar varnish. The other stuff doesn't work. It's got a lot of flex in it, but at the same time, it's very tough. Okay, and so we would spar varnish. You have to do it outdoors. You'll kill yourself with respiratory problems if you did it inside. And after you get them painted and they're dry, and that takes literally hours. All right. What you do then is you fold a feather to make the wing, and you mount it behind the body, or I'm sorry, in front of the body. And after that, you add a good quality hackle, and you're all finished. The one thing you should know about this pattern, at least, is most of you probably already know Caddis are most active in low light and toward dark or even after dark. And I think the reason this works so well is the wing is opaque, and the silhouette is probably what closes the sail when you fish these to rising fish. Just let them drift and bang, they'll usually take them. So let me put one together just to illustrate how it's done. And then we'll go on to, well, maybe one more or two if you want that many, I don't know. All right, what I'll do here, let me see if I can find any. I should have left some of my, I didn't leave my, I didn't leave my hooks out in the order I wanted them to be. Let me see what's over here. That's the Hendrickson Emerger. All right, we'll need that hackle. Let me just find the hook I prefer to have for it if I can find it. No, those are curved shanks. Sorry to take up time doing this, but let me see if I can find it. I can use that if I have to, but I don't want to. Okay. I think there might be some in here. Damn it. Well, I'll have to use this one. I prefer the longer shank, but this will have to do for now. Okay, again, this is a size 12 dry fly hook, a White River 001. But it's quite a, many of these Bass Pro hooks, I've been kind of pleased with them. They have, they're a good price and they're pretty tough. They don't, all right. For this, I'll use, just use some copper thread, copper brown thread. And the body color, you can vary that quite a bit. You can use apple green if you want to get a little crazy. Personally, I just like a sort of a medium tan or a hare's ear. Find my custom blend. Here we go. The hare's ear kind of covers all the bases. And again, when you I like just a little touch of wax, even though the thread is waxed. I kind of put it out in a long string. And I always use maybe an 1/8 of an inch of bare thread. So I can wrap back and then have the body just grow out of the shank like that. Makes quite a difference in terms of the way the final fly looks. Okay. Okay, and here's one of those little varnished feathers. Try and hold it where you can see it like that. And all you do is fold it.
Joe, you stopped about 1/3 of the way from the eye at that point?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because we got to add hackle yet.
Okay.
So there's your wing shape. Lay it on. Just do a pinch loop. Come forward a few times. Oops. It's not quite right. There we go. And again, I can find my damn materials get all scattered here out in front of me. Well, I'll use scissors. I like to clip with the. Not hurt anything. Okay, you can see that wing is really opaque, and that's why if you're going to use this fly, you want to use it at twilight or in low light conditions. I think the fish simply see it a whale of a lot better if you fish it toward dark. And then you want a good quality hackle. It might be a little big, but I'll use it. For my money, that's a little big, but it's all right. The hackles that I really like best are Charlie Collins. It's very much worth spending the money to get a #1 hackle from them.
So Matt Collins, you just bought some necks from Charlie, right?
I'm sorry?
I did. Yeah, I did. I bought some. He has some nice product. He has good dry capes and he has good good hen capes for.
Oh, absolutely. I
Nice.
recommend him highly. He's
Yeah.
In fact, I used to buy so many from him I could actually once in a while get Cree. And that's a rare bird if you can find it. What I do with this is I don't worry if the hackle's a little big, which it is on this one. Because when I get finished, I clip a V out of the bottom. And as most of you know, when you watch Caddis, they hop and bounce and get out of there. And I think the larger hackle actually helps create that illusion. So when I get it to this point, I just put a whip finish in it. Get that little pop. And what I like to do is go in and just take a V out of it. And I think it helps create the illusion of a caddis that's popping on the water. See? See if I can get that where you can see it better.
Hold it a little bit back from the camera, it'll focus better. There, right there.
Yeah, you can see. And it's got that buzziness, I call it. But it's really a good pattern toward dark. And I think it's because of the wing. The wing really stands out against the dark sky. So if you don't know about that one, what I would suggest you do is don't buy spar varnish, but instead, this is a product I've used for many years. It's called Krylon, and it's a clear finish. They use it actually to fix charcoal sketches. But if you want a product, let me show you rather than tell you. You spray a turkey tail wing, and when you want that wing to really have that tube, huh?
Just to back a little bit so it'll focus in. There you go. Now
See how you get that wing built up?
Yeah.
Like the stonefly wings. You try to do that with a regular turkey tail, and the thing will split 8 out of 10 times. But if you take a turkey tail feather, or if you tie Letort crickets, take something like a crow feather or a very dark goose feather, and again, do it outside. It'll kill you if you do it in the house, and spray it and just let it dry. It dries with a real flexibility. And I suspect, I haven't done it, I still have these varnished copper pheasant from years and years ago. But I suspect if you sprayed those copper feathers, attach them to something like a piece of shipping tape, and just give them a tiny little squirt and let them dry, you'd probably get that same flexibility, so you could fold them and make the caddis wing with them. But if you don't know about that product, this is something you really want to have in your arsenal. Krylon, low odor, clear finish. Again, don't use it indoors. It'll make you pay.
Joe,
Yeah.
I used to use the old hairsprays had plastic in it, in the 80s.
Oh yeah, yes,
the
the same
ladies used
principle,
to.
I guess.
Oh yeah, but they quit putting plastic in it, I guess, because kids inhaled it. But clear Krylon is excellent.
Oh
And
yes,
the other thing
yeah,
with
clear Krylon. I highly recommend that for any wings.
but for the wrapping tape, sometimes there's a waterproof outdoor furniture repair tape that you can
Yeah,
use.
I haven't used
some
it,
of those. Some of those other ones will fall apart and they get wet.
Oh, I suspect
So
any of them would work. In fact, even something as simple as Dave's Flexament, if you thin it and use very little of it. In fact, let me go back to this pheasant skin for a minute. Many, many years ago, Ernie Schwieber, see if I can get you to get a look at these. Many years ago, Ernie Schwieber used to take these, you see those small green feathers right at the neck,
Yeah.
just below the white ring? There's the ring on the pheasant, if you can see it. And just below, or just above that, I'm sorry, you have these tiny green feathers. And he used to take them off and coat them with a flexible cement, and then take a nail clipper and clip them to shape. And he used them for the backs of beetles, those little tiny beetles that come out, late June, early July. And I know the guys on the Latour, Charlie Fox and Marinaro and Ed Coach, they were just crazy for them. The fish would eat them all day long. So if you're going to invest in something, get yourself a full pheasant skin. Another pattern, I didn't put it together for you tonight, but one of Jack's great nymphs was something he called the sparrow. And he laughed, he said it looked like a little bird, and that's why he named it that. But it uses pheasant feathers, especially the soft rump and also the aftershaft for the head. And if you don't know it, it's a great nymph. And it's kind of large. It's actually tied on like a 6, 2 or 3X. But it's a wonderful nymph if you haven't ever tried it. Okay, well, you tell me, you want some more, or are we good?
What do the rest of you think?
I got nowhere to go.
Okay,
Our God is stuck here.
I'm enjoying this.
okay.
this is great.
Yeah, super.
Let me,
Joe, you have out the stuff for the sparrow. You could do the sparrow.
oh, I don't have the stuff right with me, but you want to look that up on the net and tie some. When you first look at them, you're going to do the same thing I did. What? how the hell is that going to catch your fish? And then just take it out and you'll become a believer. It's a really wonderful nymph. But I figured I'd show you maybe something else here. Let's do Craig Matthews, the ex-Caddis.
All right.
Okay.
You kind of had Caddis on your mind here, buddy.
Well, I'll tell you why. Many of the guys that have been around a while know about this, but if you don't know this book, it's called Fishing the Dry Fly as a Living Insect. And it was written by a guy named Leonard Wright. And it's probably long out of print now, but he was kind of the guru when it came to getting fishermen to try caddis. Most people look their nose down. They fished what they call the salmon fly out in the west, the stone flies, or in the east they fished mayflies and kind of ignored the caddis. And Leonard was one of the early voices in saying that you're passing up a really, really great thing. If you really want to have fun, and I think back to a student I had from Austria. After he finished with us, he went on to Cornell and then went to the University of Chicago and finished a PhD. Very, very bright guy, Bernard Schreibel. I probably was the only guy to get away with calling him Bernie. But he fell in love. Well, I was teaching a fly fishing class then at TC3. He just absolutely fell in love with fly fishing. And, you know, take me, Cambridge, take me out. I want to go. And so I remember I took him over on 9 Mile Creek. And I said to him, you know, Bernie, have you ever skittered caddis? And he gave me this kind of strange look, like, what? I said, okay. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Now, the only time this, in my experience at least, the only time this works is you've got to have really sort of fast, what I call bubbly riffles, water that you'd almost walk by and say, no, there won't be a trout in there, it's too fast. But if you don't know this, if you took a broom handle and you put like the pennants that the teams have, you put one at the top, one in the middle, one in the bottom, you stuck it in a stream. The one at the top would be like this, and the one in the middle would be like this, and the one at the bottom would be like this. The currents on the very bottom, even in a pretty fast riffle, go only about a third as fast as the currents up in the upper water column. So he gives me this strange look. I said, what I'm going to do, and the way this works is you want to have a fairly big caddis imitation. You want maybe the elk hair works, of course. That's one of the great ones. And this one that I'm going to show you, Craig Matthews, works very, very well. You want like a 10. You could even get away with an 8, depending on how fast the water was. You get upstream of the riffle. You kind of settle in for a few minutes, let them get used to you so you become part of the landscape. Make a cast, have the caddis sit on the top, and then you feel almost like a ringmaster in a circus. You start bouncing the caddis, popping it up out of the water and then letting it drift, popping it, letting it drift, popping it, letting it drift. And I'm watching Bernie and he's watching me and he's kind of giving me the, you know, fish eye. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this lovely brown, oh, he jumps on it. And they got him in. And Bernie looked at me and says, Cambridge, in this great Austrian accent, I thought you were sending me on a snipe hunt. He says, I never saw anything like it. I said, well, try it. And of course, the first few times he tried it, he was going a little too fast and the fish were missing. And I said to him, don't worry, just put it back. Oh, the fish missed it. I said, if he wasn't hooked, he'll come for it again. And if you've never done this, it's a great way if you have a beginner and you want them to see some surface action. But you need a sort of a beefy caddis fly. And I've been fishing caddis for a long, long time. And I never tire. In fact, there's a little secret a lot of guys don't know. But if you tie almost any kind of a pattern, like an elk hair caddis, a deer hair caddis, before you put the wing on, find a little CDC feather and wrap it as a collar, and then put your wing on. And it looks awful when you first throw it in, because the CDC splays out, and it's just, you know, a mess. I have a book here, but if you want to buy a recent book that's extremely good, Tying Dry Flies by a guy named Jay Nichols. Okay. And in here, he has one he calls the CDC and elk. And it's basically an elk hair caddis with a CDC collar wrapped in it. You'll be amazed at what a difference putting that little bit of CDC on it will make. So if you like elk hair caddis, another very good one, it's kind of gone out of favor now, but if you can get a woodchuck skin, the back skin of a woodchuck, clip just the guard hairs, strip the other stuff off, and use that as a wing. They used to refer to it as the chuck caddis. And that's quite a fine pattern. I like this one. It's Craig Matthews' invention because it's simple and it's very, very effective. And I'd put it right up there with the elk hair caddis in terms of being effective. Not hard to tie. It goes together pretty quickly. And yet, you might like the results you get with it. So let me show it to you if you're not familiar with it. Again, I like the long shank hooks, but I don't know. I thought I had them here, but I don't know what the hell I did wrong. So we'll just tie it on one of these and see if that'll work. Oh, by the way, I just brought these out to show you. One of the best bodkins you can find are old hat pins. Oh, damn it, I don't know what this camera does to me. Just an old-fashioned hat pin. You got something to grab up here, and they're pretty tough. And if you have to apply something like super glue, they, you know, very, very cheap. You can buy a whole package of them for a couple of bucks. And yet they do work very well as kind of throwaway bodkins. So I'll show you this one. Oops, I don't want that. I want olive thread. Thread has a way of vanishing here in this table. I don't know how I'm doing it. I have red, I have chartreuse, I have everything but. I'll tell you what, try with chartreuse so you can see what I'm. No, I can't do that because I'll pull it out. Oh, no. Something I meant to show you. Another something you got to buy. Can't be too rich, too thin, have too many fly rods or too many tying tools. These are floss threaders. You can get them in any pharmacy. I think for $5 you get about 50 of them. And this is when they're out of the package. If you can even see that, I don't know. all they are is a piece of monofilament with a loop. But especially if you have metal bobbins, if you use a stainless steel bobbin threader, eventually you're going to get grooves and ruts cut in it, and the thread is going to start breaking on you. But those things, they're cheap, and one package will last you for 10 years in terms of the rate at which you'll use it. So let's, I'll just use brown thread, the hell with it. Show you how it goes together. I like olive better. I know I had it here somewhere, but I don't know what the hell with it. Need these later, so we might as well use it now. Okay, you can. Craig's pattern actually calls for Z-lawn, olive Z-lawn. I find sparkle yarn or just olive antron works just about as well. And you basically use it to make a shuck, all right? What I like to do is tie it up toward the front, pull it back, and go all the way down. You can let it hang. You don't have to worry about it for right now, as long as it's in there securely. Okay. And the next thing you want is some olive dubbing. I like this synthetic living fiber a lot. Easy to work with. It's almost got sort of a feel of seal hair to it, but it works nicely. And again, when you dub, save that eighth inch or so of bare thread, so you can first wrap back, and then your body grows right out of the shank and you don't get any lumps. Okay. And then you want some coastal deer hair. Cut out a clump. You can put it in a stacker if you want, but you can get away with not stacking it. The one thing you do have to do is get all the fuzz out before you try to tie with it. Okay. Another little trick that'll save you time and effort. I size the wing to be just about a little past the bend, and I seal that with my thumb and forefinger. And then I cut the front side. So when I put it on, the trick here is 2 loose wraps. And then when you get to your third one, as you come up, you tighten, see? And you're holding the wing so it's not going to go crazy. And then wiggle, waggle, but keep a tight thread. Otherwise you'll capture too many deer hair. Wiggle, waggle right up through the hair to bind it a little bit to the hook. Okay? Push back. Enough to make a head. Find my finisher. Here it is. And you can flare pull the hair down slightly. I much prefer curved scissors. There they are. With a little curve in them, and you can just kind of snip the head slightly. You don't, because caddis do have prominent heads. And then pull the shuck and clip it. And there's your ex-caddis. Very easy fly to make. And it's great for skittering. Just bounce it on a riffle. And about the time you're feeling foolish, you'll see some big trout go up. And if they miss, just keep banging it around, annoying them. I think what happens is that in a riffle, it creates streaks of light. And the fish just want to go and find whatever's causing that. And it's amazing. I've seen them make 4 or 5 passes. And eventually what I do is I pop it and then stop it and just let it drift down. And the one thing I've learned about fishing is if a fish takes it going downstream, he really wants it. Even if it's a nymph. I've had big salmon, had the nymph go by them. And then all of a sudden it was like, how did I miss that? And they turn around and they go downstream to grab it. And any fish that turns downstream, you're almost sure to catch because they hit it so hard, you don't have to worry about hooking. So any questions on that? It's a pretty simple pattern.
Yeah, nice job.
Hmm?
Nice job. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a very simple, simple thing to make, but it casts a lot of nice shadow, I think, and light going through the wing. You can overdo the wing, but I make it a little heavy if I know I'm going to be using it to skitter because I want to keep it sitting up on the top and riding high. You had enough?
No, we're around the curve. We got to do the last one.
Oh, okay. That was the Mink one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's Leonard Wright's.
Yeah,
Leonard, right?
Leonard was big on using mink for wings.
And George has all these mink tails that he just doesn't know what to do with.
Well, that's what you need. I have one whole skin. It's a good outfit. I know George traps, and so I got this one many years ago. It's a wild mink from out Idaho way. There's an outfit in Moscow, Idaho, Moscow Fur Traders or something they call themselves. They have really, really nice fur if you're looking for one. I have literally plastic bags, if I can find them here, full of mink tails. Here's just a sample. Mink tails. I probably have 4 or 5 in there of various colors. The only thing I didn't bring out, but I'll show it to you. I can show you how to do it anyway. There's one thing you have to know if you tie with mink tail, and that is you just about
Make sure the mink is dead.
Huh? Oh yeah, you want to be sure of that too. It could be mean critters. What you want though, you want to be sure of, is to use super glue at the base of the wing. And I'll tell you why. It is very, very, the fur is very kind of translucent, but it's also very, very slippery. And I don't care how tightly you make the wraps. If you don't use a tiny drop, that's why I use the hairpin. I actually stick it in the container, pull it out, put the tiniest drop on, and then immediately wipe it so that I can use it again. If you don't use super glue to hold the wing's going to pull out. I can promise you that. There's not many things you can say with that much certainty, but I can say that the wing will pull out absolutely if you don't use super glue to fix it. And only a little bit. You don't need to go crazy, but you do have to have some. Let me see if I can find my custom blend here. Here we are. That's another item you really want to buy is a individual coffee blender. Don't use the whites, you won't like it. But if you like, I like dubbing and I like to make my own so I can sort of mix the colors. I've discovered you can usually make better dubbing than you can buy. Takes a little experimentation, but eventually. Okay, so again, I'm going to leave that little bit of bare thread right up near the shank. And that way you always get a smooth start like that to the body. Like it more. After a while, you get fairly good at figuring out how much you need. And I like to make it a little bit bulky up toward the front. That's where the insect's thorax swells when it's about to hatch. Okay, we'll take this hapless mink here. Go down to the tail. Find a bunch of guard hairs. You got to pull all of these out. Guard hairs are no good to you. I don't stack it. I just kind of do it by hand and eye. Use that for the wing. Come on. The light is bad here where I am. Okay, I'll try it again this time, see. No, I can't see what I'm doing here. Maybe a third's the charm. White paper, maybe I can. Sometime you can reverse it. Yeah, that's it.
So Joe, just to clarify, you pulled the fur out of the guard hairs just to leave the guard hair itself?
Yeah, you want just the guard hair and the slightest bit of under fur. Use the under fur to cinch it. Now, if I were tying this for real, okay, at this point, I would add the tiniest drop of super glue right there. Because as tight as that wing seems to be on, It's
Find out.
squirrel hair is maybe a close second, but nothing is more slippery than mink hair. So if you're tying some for real, I won't bother with the super glue and waiting for it to dry. But you definitely would add super glue right there. Let it sit for, oh, I don't know, 3 minutes or so. And you'll be good to go. And then you just want a high quality hackle. Let's see if I can find one that's about the right size. Yeah, up in here somewhere. That's about right. And again, if you want to, yeah, that's good. You can hackle these pretty heavily, but again, nothing beats this flattening to make hackle behave. Have a good side look at you. This is a good, really good tool for this kind of work. You see how close you can get. All right. Let's see if we have a, you'll find that hackle will just about always be 90 degrees and twist on you if you flatten the stem. And again, I like to hackle fairly heavily. But watch now with this thing, you can go right in. Much better than scissors. I just fold everything back. That's called the mink tail caddis.
Very cool.
The best colors, there is one version of this that is absolutely deadly. Any of you ever fished the black caddis hatch?
Yeah.
You want about a 16 dry fly, 1X long, and make this fly with black dubbing and a good quality black hackle, and use black mink for the wing, and you can't keep them off it. They absolutely love it.
Mm.
So if you know you're going to be running into black caddis, that's the one. The other color that works extremely well is, I got one here, down in the Delaware and the Beavertail especially, is a ginger.
Oh, yeah.
That you can see the beautiful guard hair on that. That's an exceptionally good pattern. Again, from about 6 at night until dark, that's when the caddis really get active.
All right.
Good job,
So,
Joe.
I
Unbelievable.
don't know. How do we do? Can we clap?
Oh,
Sure.
no, please don't.
Yeah.
Let me
Everybody
show you
has to
though.
mute.
Before I quit, let me show you some books. The first one is this one, a little notebook. Anyone want to guess what that's for?
Logging on the stream.
Got it. This little thing has saved my bacon more times than I can count. And I remember one time, I still remember the date. It was April 21st, 1986. I was on Salmon Creek, and I happened to have a box of my old fishing journals. I'm not making this up. I went back to, and it was again April 20th, of 1976, 10 years ahead or behind. I looked in and there was a note. Did very well on green caddis larvae. Fish seemed to want them and not anything else. So I thought, the hell with it, I'll try it. I fished the pheasant tail. I fished my CK. I had maybe 2 fish. I started fishing that green caddis, bang, bang, bang. And they were rainbows and some nice ones. And for some odd reason, that must have been what was dominating in the stream. But you can go back. It makes nice reading even just to look back, you know, fishing 10 or 12 years ago. You can just record the what the weather was like. Another thing that you really shouldn't leave home without, I have a hard time persuading people about this until they do it, and then they won't be without it. Go get yourself an El Cheapo meat thermometer. Okay.
Hold it up a little bit.
It's got a little clip on it. Okay. Whenever you go fishing, especially in the winter, okay, your fingers are not going to go notice 2 or 3 degree difference in the water, but this will. And many, many times, especially in cold weather, 3 or 4 degrees can make all the difference in terms of whether you're going to catch fish or not. And as you roam, pop it in once in a while. And if you start getting 40, 42, where you were getting 30, you know you got a spring or you got a spring coming. And you find the spring holes in the winter and you'll catch 10, 12 fish without moving 75 yards, because they, winter fish especially, bunch up in water that's to their liking in terms of current and temperature. That's one of the best things to have with you if you fish regularly. Make a note of it in your journal too, where you may have found a spring hole or what the water temperature was when a certain kind of an insect was coming. Odds are very, very high that you'll get a repeat performance down the road. Some other things though, in the way of books, if you can find this book, it's probably well out of print now. I had the pleasure of knowing Ed Coach, and Ed was a master of fishing around Carlisle and that area. And this one's called Fishing the Midge. It was, I think it was his only, it wasn't his only book, but it was his first book. It probably dates back to the 70s now. And then there's a follow-up called Terrestrials.
Yeah.
And this one was by Ed Coach and Harrison Steves. And Harrison is an extremely fine tyer and fisherman, and he's a master at terrestrials. Another book, if you can find it, it's probably out of print, but sometimes you see it at a store or a library will have it. Nymphs and the Trout by Frank Sawyer. If you read no other book on nymph fishing, this is the one to have. He was the guy that invented the original killer bug, and he tied it not with thread but with copper wire and a wool yarn that's no longer made, but they make pretty good duplicates of it now. So you might get lucky. Another book, and this one has been, I know, reprinted. I saw it in New Jersey at the show. Chauncey Lively's Fly Box. And if you take no other pattern out of this, learn to tie his horse fly. You simply don't need any other terrestrial pattern. Throw it down any place bushes hang over. It's a great beginner's fly because the worse you cast it, the better it works. You put it down with a nice big splat and the fish will come out from under the bushes to grab it. Some other really good patterns in here, by the way, but Lively's horsefly is a classic. It's one you shouldn't be without. So now, and of course, Jay Nichols, if you're looking for I know this book is recent and still in print. If you really want to fish dry flies and learn how to tie them, this is a book you want. Jay is a superb fisherman. One last comment. This stuff is called Pearsall's Gossamer Silk Thread. I just bought out the last supply of it at a place in Indiana. They're not making it anymore, apparently. So if you are a traditionalist like me and you tie a lot of soft tackles, scout the bushes and find places that still have it and order it, because I don't think you'll be seeing it for a while.
All right, do we have some questions? Anybody have a question to share?
It's good.
Well, I would like to thank Joe, and I also want to pass along thanks from Matt Collins. He had to leave early to put his kids to bed. And
Well,
Joe, thank you so much.
oh, you're most welcome. In fact, the person we really have to thank is Carol. She did a lot of the legwork on this. I'm a Luddite. I don't know anything, as is obvious, about this technology. So.
Well, thank you, Carol. I know that this was a learning curve to go through, how to figure out how to do this, and I think we're all learning here. This is our first attempt. My question to the group: this is the first attempt at doing a Zoom fly tying masterclass like this. How do you think it went?
I thought it went very well. I could see Joe well, and you know, the background was good, Joe. I think that we finally got the vice where it belonged. And I got to say, Joe, I thought I was the only one that couldn't find what I wanted when I wanted to tie something.
Oh,
But now I feel good about myself. Thank you.
oh yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much, Joe. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think it worked out really well. I could see what was going on, and I love your handout, because I can really follow along. So thanks
Excellent.
so
Good.
much.
How are you, Ed?
Yeah. I like this long format fly tying. You know, when we do it at the club meetings, it's half an hour and it's always
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
rushed.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
you know, this was, gave us more of a chance to ask questions, I think, as we went along. It was quite nice.
Well, I
enjoyed
enjoyed it. It's always fun to tie, you know.
You know, one thing to improve on would be if we could get a way to zoom on the fly occasionally.
Exactly. That would be
Because
terrific.
the fly
yes.
itself is not always the thing that's in focus. And I guess that's
I know. That's
a learning
shame.
curve for everybody, you know, but I kept trying to zoom, but on my end, I'm on my iPhone and nothing happened. So
Yeah. Yeah. Shame.
This is the
Well,
best
my
front
buddy
seat
sent
I've
me
had.
sent me a good little note. He said, I've been without sports now for 2 months, and this nice lady joined me on the couch. I think she's my wife.
Oh, Joe.
All right, guys. Well, it was fun.
Joe.
Have a drink on me, huh?
I will, Joe.
Yeah,
Okay.
Joe.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I want to remind you that the club is planning our first virtual meeting on May 4th, and you should have gotten an email on that. There'll be a smaller group on a Zoom call, but we'll be broadcasting out on Facebook Live. So that's a bit of an experiment. Vince will be doing the rod raffle drawing live at the end of that meeting. So I would encourage you, if you haven't bought rod raffle tickets yet, there's a link on our Facebook page and a link on the email I just sent allow you to buy those through PayPal. And Jay, you just went through that, and was it simple enough to do? To buy the rod raffle ticket? Okay, so we're seeing a lot of sales come through PayPal, and so I'd like to encourage you to hook into Facebook, watch us on live. If that's a problem, we can hook you into the Zoom call. But the easiest way to do it is through Facebook Live. So thank you, everybody, and we wish you a good evening. Stay safe.
Okay,
Thank
take
you,
care.
Thank you. Good evening, Joe, Carol.
Yep, thank you.
Take it easy.
Good
Good night,
night.
all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good to
Night.
see
Everyone
everybody.
put this together.
Yeah. Thank you, Vince.
Yep, you're welcome.
Yep.
Thanks, Vince.
Thanks. Good night.
Say good night, Carol.
Good night, Carol.
Sounds like Gracie, right? Good night,
There she
everybody.
is.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Good
Carol.
night, Carol.
Worked
Good
out
night.
great.
Be well, be safe.
Be safe too. Stay healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take
Good
care.
night, all.